Hey everyone, welcome to our show. The tour guide welcomes you. I'm your host, That Girl, and it is Friday, April 28th, 2023. At any point in time you're consuming this content, I can genuinely only hope you're doing well, and I apologize in advance if I waste your time. So last week we didn't do a show, so I needed to do some research and get my bearings together. I feel a lot more comfortable and secure having this discussion with you. It's going to be, of course, a little bit controversial, and I apologize, and I don't ever want to create any offense. I'm just trying to bring attention and have these discussions and conversations. So, if you cannot see the description, I'm going to tell you it's about the homelessness and how to, I guess, address the issue, bring up more concerns, have more conversations surrounding it, and also I'm big on prevention. So, before we can even really jump into talking about prevention, we need to understand what's currently happening and what has already been done, what's currently being done. So my focus is just going to be very, very broad. I live in a relatively conservative community, farming. I always talk about that, very blue collar type work, farm labor, lots of industrial type jobs. So not very, I guess, cosmopolitan, not big city, just very, very humble, So the issue isn't like when people talk about California on the news and they talk about the problems that California faces, a lot of them are talking about the major cities, the extremes, the San Francisco, Los Angeles crisis, and the smaller towns are kind of overlooked or not really discussed. The situation, though, and the reason why I feel very compelled and led to have these conversations is, again, the prevention. It's happening. There's still problems. How do we address it, and how do we, essentially, I guess, combat this? It's kind of like a wound to someone, and it's bleeding, it's hemorrhaging, and we need to stop it and find ways to suture it and seal it up. So stop the bleeding. So I often I've had discussions about this in the past, and it's been a while since I brought it up. A couple of weeks ago, I posted a blog about our community's soup kitchen. I called it a Paramount Soup Kitchen for the community, and the church itself has become more of a priority because it is the foundation. It is the very, very, I guess you would call it like the battleground, like the boots on the ground activism, really reaching the community members who are most vulnerable and most in need of attention and addressing some of the issues. They've been actively working for a long time, addressing the needs, receiving the donations, cooking the meals, and providing something for people to eat once a day, 7 days a week. There's a guaranteed meal provided for you with drinks and oftentimes food and other different types of donations. So there's other churches and other organizations that also provide food and also provide different services for laundry, for showers, for housing. There's different programs out there. The situation is, though, that there are still people who are lacking housing. And as we're seeing and paying attention to the trends in our nation, we're seeing the inflation, cost of living expenses are getting ridiculous and through the roof. The different situations we've had with the pandemic, with employment situations, lots of contributing factors that it's adding to this problem, compacting this issue, and making it difficult for people to remain in their homes and to find some type of stability and security. So, again, thankfully, it's not crisis mode where, there are certain places in the bigger cities where we're seeing mass amounts of crime and human defecation, and then assaults in the streets, and people are getting beat up, and there's, it's not that way across the board all over the state of California. So, and having these discussions is what can we do to continue to, maintain the safety, to improve the safety, and what can be done to fix some of these issues that we're having. So I have to ask some important questions, so I'm going to just put them out there with, I don't have all the answers, but I'm just putting information out there and having, hopefully allowing other people to continue the conversation. So short question is, why are people homeless? So obviously, I've mentioned before, it's very expensive to live, especially in the state of California. And if you don't have proper documentation, if you've lost your identification, if someone has taken your identity, and your, just ID card and the requirements for that to get a true government ID, it's just exponentially difficult to maintain all of that sometimes. Documentation, birth certificates, very, very long waiting list trying to get all of these documents in order. It can be very, very trivial and could cost you a lot of freedoms and opportunities. So that's part of the issue. We also are aware of homelessness is due to mental illness or mental handicap or mental delays, varying broad of spectrums and conditions and disorders that would cause someone not to be fit for normal, whatever normal is, society. And and part of it is criminal activity, drug addiction, all of that kind of comes into play where it's just easier to navigate some business, and you get stuck into a cycle, and homelessness there. So it's all kind of compacted together. And then I always like to ask the question: so, why are people addicted to drugs? One of the things that we've researched, and I have the book right here to reference, one of my favorite books to go to, and I'm still planning on picking up the series and going through it with you guys. Just, again, prioritizing. So, Drugs in the Making of the Modern World, the proper title is Forces of Habit, Drugs in the Making of the Modern World by David T. Corwright. It's very important to learn the history of drugs, where they stemmed from, what their purpose was, what the reason is, why people utilize them, how it gets distributed, and what is the addiction factor? Why are people more prone to addictions and other people not? So this book does a great job going through some details, and we've gone through some chapters, so great recap. Some of the drug addictions that people are dealing with today, I would dare to say it's manufactured. They've pumped a lot of stuff out into the communities, knowing that people would get addicted, and you're wondering who they is. Well, that's for a different subject. We're not going to go down that rabbit trail today. But essentially, some of it is manufactured. Some of it is by accident. The pharmaceutical companies had placed these controlled substances out into the public to alleviate common problems that people were dealing with, and they did not, I don't know, I shouldn't say for sure whether or not we know that the intended effect was met with adverse effects such as the addiction. And is it because the companies are providing it, or is it because the person themselves who are imbibing it don't have self-control? So that's been the debate back and forth of who's really to blame. Is it the people who are producing these drugs or these remedies, or is it the person itself who is having the issue? So for another day, but this is, again, just going quickly over some of these talking points. Why are people addicted to drugs? So it could be obviously poor circumstances. If you are living in a very depressing state of mind, the controlled substances make you feel better and happy and elated and just coping, So, hey, how's it going, Alex? So we can spend a good couple hours talking about why people are addicted to controlled substances, but ultimately, this is where we're at. A lot of people are, and we're just going to leave it at that. And you yourself can continue with those discussions. Another component to addiction is nutrient deficiency. If you are ailing because your body isn't getting the proper nutrition and you feel sick and crappy, you're going to lean towards something that's going to make you feel better, which is a drug. So that's another reason why people aren't in the proper health, physically, emotionally. They're dehydrated and they feel like crap. And then also physical dependency pops up, and we've already brought up mental illness. Sometimes it's used as for a medicinal purpose to treat some type of disorder, mental disorder. And then so if you're using drugs that's considered recreational and not prescribed from a doctor, it could be seen as, oh, you're addicted. But if you get a prescription from a doctor, it's a similar derivative of what the doctor is giving you. But it's okay if the doctor gives it to you, but it's not okay if you make it on the streets or get it from your neighborhood drug dealer. So things like that, where I'm talking about some of it's manufactured problems, and other times it's people trying to, cope with some things in life. So why are people on drugs? Well, just different reasons. So again, we can analyze that a different day. So, but one of the things I wanted to bring up was coming from James, the book of James, chapter 4, verses. Sorry, my microphone. Sorry, I'm a little bit rusty. One day not, or 1 week not doing it, it kind of throws you off. So James 4, 1-3, it says, where do wars and fights come from among you? Do they not come from your desires for pleasure for war in your members? You lust and do not have. You murder and covet and do not obtain. You fight and war, yet you do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask amiss, that you may spend it on your pleasures. So, going back to the book, Forces of Habit, Drugs in the Making of the Modern World, one of the biggest things is a lot of wars took place because people wanted their controlled substances. The opium crisis, tea, sugar, they would enslave people to produce these controlled substances so other people could enjoy them and these vices. And so it's very frustrating. We bring up the biblical text, James 4, 1-3, hearing about it's because people want their pleasures and they want these things. So another reason why people are addicted is just simply because they want it. And we've seen over the course of history what has happened when people can't get what they want. We talk about the drug cartels and the drug wars and all of that stuff. It's very real, and we're seeing that. Yeah, right here, 2 Chronicles 12:14 KJV, and he did evil because he prepared not his heart to seek the Lord. That's another problem that we're having, is there's no moral compass, there's no moral foundation. People just do what they want because they can, and they don't care. And so that's another contributing factor. We have to accept the fact that people just legitimately are selfish and they don't care, and they're going to do what they want to do regardless of how it affects other people. And that's just a sad reality that we have to accept, and society has to deal with, trying to splice who is a person who's dealing with an actual problem, who needs help, and who is just legitimately like, I don't care, I'm just selfish. And it's hard for people to discern that, and it's something that society has been contending with for a very long time. So, but more importantly, going back to the soup kitchen, you have a lot of people who are the old school mind. Well, I shouldn't say the old school mindset. How can I put this where it's not so like? This is the toss-up again. Why we're having this discussion. So there's a couple of verses. 1 Thessalonians 5:12-22, and I have verses 2 Thessalonians 3:6-15. And the one in 2 Thessalonians makes reference to pretty much those who are not willing to work, should not eat. Like, if you're not willing to do your work to earn a keep or earn a living or support those who are already working, then you don't, I guess, deserve to eat. So let me read it directly from the scripture so I'm not over here butchering the references too much. Sorry, I got too many moving parts today. Okay, so again, we're just going to read 2 Thessalonians chapter 3. Let me just jump to right where it says, trying to find a specific one. Okay, for even when we were with you, we commanded you this: if anyone will not work, neither shall he eat. And then he says, for we hear that there are some who walk among you in disorderly manner, not working at all, but are busybodies. Now those who are such we command and exhort through our Lord Jesus Christ, that they work in quietness and eat their own bread. But as for you, brethren, do not grow weary in doing good. And if anyone does not obey our word in this epistle, note that person and do not keep company with him, that he may be ashamed. Yet do not count him as an enemy, but admonish him as a brother. So it's very, very important we have to hold a certain standard and expectation for people to be willing to carry their own work, their own workload, their own labor to contribute to society or to contribute somehow. So the difference, I feel, that is so difficult for people, and why we have these back and forth, like, should we feed the homeless? Should we feed the poor? These people aren't working. There are people who are able-bodied who choose not to. They're intentionally taking advantage of the system. They're getting free food, getting food stamps, etc., but they're not trying, they're not working. The reason why I think we have to be very, very careful about slandering and being so hard on people is we need to also realize what, how do I put it? Like, pretty much expanding the workforce or the available type of jobs. Not everyone has the capacity to work a conventional job, and we need to consider what is truly available out there. So I have a couple of solutions for more job opportunities that would be beneficial to society, and that someone would still be able to be considered working and contributing without everyone looking down and saying, you're not trying. But on the contrast to 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, we go to 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 12 through 22. It's very, very short. And it says, and we urge you, brethren, to recognize those who labor among you and over you in the Lord, and admonish you, and to esteem them very highly in love for their work's sake. Be at peace among yourselves, and please listen to this one very important, very closely. Now we exhort you, brethren, warn those who are unruly, comfort the faint-hearted, uphold the weak, be patient with all. See that no one renders evil for evil to anyone, but always pursue what is good, both for yourselves and for all. Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, in everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Jesus Christ for you. Do not quench the spirit, do not despise prophecies, test all things, hold fast to what is good, abstain from every form of evil. So it's very important, again, to hold the standards and expectations that if someone's not willing to work, then clearly they don't want to eat. But we also need to be patient with everyone and pray for people, and realize that we were commanded to give to the poor, and to, and I have another reference, Matthew chapter 5, verses 43 to 44. This is the King James Version. It says, "Ye have heard that it has been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you." And there's several places in the Bible where Jesus has encouraged you to, feed the poor, and to have that sacrificial heart and loving spirit, and to, help those who can do nothing for you, and to give is better to give than to receive. Several places in the Bible. So I kind of weigh, how much more did Jesus talk about loving even your enemies, even people who take advantage of you, even people who would demand and take from you, to continue to love and do good to those people and those who can do nothing for you, versus what was talked about in the church in Thessalonica. So the balance is, there's several hardworking people out there who are sacrificing their time and their money to keep themselves afloat. And, no one's saying that you have to give to the poor and the people who aren't working. We also need to address, though, what the bigger picture and outlook looks like for communities when we willingly choose to ignore those things. I love how people will say, like, that's not my problem, or that's not my responsibility, or like, that's their life, or they chose that path, or, well, that's, different class system. They can't relate, they can't empathize. They assume that these people are in these circumstances because they didn't work hard enough, or it's karma, or they deserve it, or this, that, and the other, or, there's so many reasons why you could easily dismiss a person that's homeless and say, well, they haven't worked for it, or they don't deserve it, or they're criminals, and these are the consequences or the repercussions for their poor choices. My thing is, as much as that may be true, in some circumstances, it doesn't change. If you're a Christian, it doesn't change what God has called you to do. But more importantly, I don't want to hear you complaining when someone tries to steal your car or someone's stealing your crap, or like when there's enough people out there who didn't have any interventions, where there weren't enough people who were like, hey, you know what, let me see what I can do to help. Because realize, though, these people who you are looking down upon that you don't like, many of them have children. And their children grow up to be members of society, contributing or uncontributing members of society. So you ignore the mom or the father or the whomever is struggling because they don't deserve it, or they're criminals, or that's the consequences for their poor choices, or they didn't work hard enough, ignoring a whole bunch of other circumstances that could have led to these people's demise or their poor circumstances. You're going to have that mindset in your head, carrying it with you, giving you a justification or reason for not trying to help. Ignoring that 10 years into the future, that family that you refuse to help, their child is now an adult, pretty much hardened by the streets, and could potentially be the one that's going to rob you in your older age. And you're thinking, why is there so much crime? Why is there so much violence? It's like, we need to do something. Well, 10 years ago when you had this mindset, I wasn't going to help these people because they didn't deserve it, and you thought you were better than them. That was the opportunity to invest in it, in that person, in that individual that you thought their parents or whomever wasn't worth the time and effort because you had your opinions and presuppositions about them. It's much bigger than this little small picture that you have right now. You're driving by, you see a homeless person, and you have this opinion, not thinking about how your action or inaction could affect you, yourself, or other people down the road. This is an opportunity to have a conversation for prevention for the future and to stop the hemorrhaging that's happening right now. Because if we're paying attention, we know what's happening in our country. And again, I'm living in a very conservative area in the Central California. Most people went outside of the state and they hear about California and the problems. They think about San Francisco and they think about Los Angeles and the bigger cities and these are small pockets of the state. There's so much more going on. And to maintain the safety and the happiness and the wholesomeness in the communities, we are going to have to address some of the issues and talk about ways to remedy these problems, realizing that, again, I talked about earlier, the drug problem. Some of it is manufactured. Some of it is not necessarily the person's fault, the initial introduction. I've heard people who were addicted to meth have said that when they were a child, they were prescribed Ritalin or Adderall or something, and they truly believe that prescription as a child was what predisposed them to their adult meth use. You can get certain prescriptions, like I've heard of one called Vyvanse or something, which is like a derivative of meth, very, very similar. And it's just unfortunate that you become dependent, or several stories about young high school athletes who experience an injury. They're prescribed a hard narcotic and they end up getting chemically dependent or addicted to it. So they can't get it from their doctors anymore. Then they start getting it from the streets, and then that starts their addiction problem. And again, of course, at a certain point, it's that person's responsibility to find soberness, but we also need to hold the adults who know better accountable, and especially the big pharma drug companies who know the side effects, who know the potential risks, and who are just kind of negligent with these things. And that's where our compassion comes in. Then we also need to address deficiencies, the mental deficiencies. If you are a child in vitro and developing, and your mother was on hard times and circumstances, she was stressed out, she wasn't getting the proper nutrients for herself as you were developing, and you grow up, it's a good chance that you're going to deal with some deficiencies and some handicaps and some delays due to that contributing factor, or to that lack of nutrients. And for people just to assume like, oh, you're not working hard enough or you didn't put enough effort in, it's like that doesn't, it's irrelevant. And we need to stop with this mindset of like, well, you didn't work hard enough for it. You don't, it's like, we need to stop questioning who deserves it and start looking at the bigger end goal of what we want. We want happier, safer, healthier communities and opportunities for people. And there's a lot of programs out there and there's a lot of opportunity. It's just difficult when you're already caught up in the cycle, when you think society is looking down on you, that they're disappointed with you, that again, all the things I listed, you have that in the back of your mind as you're trying to overcome some hardships. And then again, we know that there's people out there who are intentionally going to just take advantage of the system no matter what. They don't care. They're going to just do what they're going to do and be evil. And that's a risk that sometimes you're going to have to take for the greater good, the greater outcome. And it'll have to work itself out case by case. So, like I said, there's already a lot of programs out there. It's just very difficult to help the people who are already in the midst of the hardships in the eye of the storm of their own personal struggles. And that's why I keep bringing up this, I call it the Paramount Soup Kitchen. It needs to be a priority. And there's lots of people that go in there and invest their time and their resources into helping to make sure that people are fed and make sure that they get the right housing. There's a tiny house project that I've heard is being worked on, names on waiting list. And the biggest thing, though, I feel if we cannot rely on the government, especially with what's going on in beautiful Golden State of California, if we cannot rely on government aid and for the money to get allocated to the right place to address some of the needs, it's definitely very, very important that all the churches step up. And that's where people went to initially. That's where the poor went to for food and resources, was the church. And it's been so far removed in our modern society. It's kind of upsetting to hear that once you ask a person about the church, they have such a negative outlook about it. Like, oh, I don't want to go there, or, you know, they're going to judge me, or this, that, and the other. So many reasons. So this is just to kind of remind people that it doesn't take much, you know, extra supplies, one day a month, something, provide food. It could be takeout boxes. And this isn't so much like, you know, oh, we're going to give out food and just because, like, so we can just stop this whole dependency thing on the government. This is like truly planting like love in people's hearts. Some churches, like once a month or once a week, they'll have like a dinner. So families are welcome just to come and eat. You don't have to cook. You go to the church, they have a meal for you once a week, guarantee a hot meal. You know, if more churches did that, it would take some of the pressure off parents, especially single moms. Well, I shouldn't just say single moms, single parents in general, who are working and they're trying to stretch out the budget. They're trying to stretch out their own mental capacity. And it would be good for them to have a break, an emotional break, and hopefully a loving environment where they could just say, hey, you know what, let's go here to eat tonight, and then tomorrow they'll have this place. And it's just one less thing they have to worry about. And that's really how you build community and build your churches, is the outreach through the food programs and a fresh cooked meal. It gives the people in the church an opportunity to do something as well. You have elderlies and older ladies who like to cook, but there's no one in their house. They don't have anyone to cook for. So just some ideas, possible just to, again, make sure that we can look, when we look to the future, that there are multiple ways to try to reach some of these people out there who've, like, their spirits are completely broken. You often hear is like, they don't hear very many positive things sometimes. I've seen, watch videos, I've talked to people and stuff, and, like it's good to, have people smile, see a smile, someone to give you, like, you're like, you're so beautiful, like encouraging things. The depression is really hard. It's easy to lose your sense of true worth and value. It can be very debilitating, and an extension of love goes a very, very long way. And again, talking about the children in the future and how this is going to affect them or not affect them, hopefully, if we get more intervention in there. And like I said, the church that's doing the soup kitchen and the other ones that do, there's churches that do breakfast, some that do that have showers, some have laundry services, there's different shelters, so many different programs out there. So not saying that there's not things already happening, but just continue with these efforts and to really try to, the average person out there who's like, I don't know what I can do to help, or the people who assume like, oh, this has nothing to do with me, or it's not my problem. It's like, it's everybody's problem, and it's going to be a bigger problem if you continue to ignore it. And there are ways to, again, address it and prevent it. Like, I heard recently, it wasn't, of course, made mainstream news, but there are still a lot of murders and sexual assaults that take place, especially amongst that population, the homelessness, and unfortunately it doesn't get much attention because of the demographic. And there are people who are still living in fear, and people who are in poor circumstances, and they'll never ever get any attention or any help. And oftentimes you get so used to the mindset that people don't care that you just give up. And there are people out there who need help, who need to know that there's people who do care, and give them a sense of love, especially the love of God, the love of Christ, for them to see that and have it exhibited through your actions. So lots to take in. I've been debating on how much detail I want to go into each topic and how frequent I want to talk about this, because that's why I didn't want to talk about it last week, because there's just a lot to unpack, and there's a lot to be said on each subject, and I can be very, very long-winded. So I try my best to keep it very, very basic and on the surface, but there's a lot more discussions that need to be had and a lot of solutions. I've talked about like hotels, not necessarily like a shelter or a program that would operate out of an old hotel, and you get like a 12-hour stay, a chance to do laundry, sleep and rest in a bed, meals, and then check out, and then have like a rotation. Different ideas. I got lots of ideas, and slowly doing grassroots talking and networking with people. And I'm always open to hear what other people think, what other people are doing, and what's already being done. And again, on the surface, there's a lot more that needs to be said, but I just wanted to bring that up, and very grateful for the soup kitchen, for the services that provide breakfast and the showers and the laundry and all of the stuff that's already been taking place. And I'm very grateful. Now we just need to figure out how to really reach those who are at a point where like they are just kind of like stuck in a rut, and they're in the cycle, they're in the system of addiction or the mental handicap, and they just, I was going to suggest different forms of work. So one of the ideas that's been popping around for a while is the, opening up, making shelters available for people where they can bring their pets as well and have an animal shelter attached. And one of those ideas would be to also, possibly start like a doggy daycare type thing, and, creating an environment where it may not be a conventional job where like you would expect that you have to work super, super hard and earn this amount of money for you to earn your keep. But again, not everyone's at the same capacity to work every type of conventional job. So working with nature and animals and helping the community to thrive in other ways like that. It's still considered work, and defining different ways to bring different talents and beauty and varying hobbies and interests and bringing that to light could be very, very valuable to community if people are given more opportunities to do that and express themselves without the heavy pressure of like, oh, well, you're not really working, or that's not work. So, but I will prayerfully hope to have more of these discussions and go into more details with some of the ideas. But I appreciate any person who sat here and listened to this and taken anything that I said into consideration, and not trying to be disrespectful or disingenuous or put anyone down. Just again, hoping to have a good discussion about what's working, what's not, what to expect in the future, and ways to continue the great environment that we have here, and to continue supporting that and the efforts that's already taken place. So with that, I've been your host, the tour guide. At any point in time you're consuming this, I can only hope you're doing well. Thank you for tuning in, and as always, God's peace.